Welcome to World Heritage Rookies, the podcast where we explore UNESCO World Heritage Sites one episode at a time. We are Lina
and Ralph, and we will travel alongside you to some of the most stunning sites our world has to offer.
Each week, we dive into the history, fun facts, and reasons why World Heritage Sites matter for humanity, sharing our own discoveries and travel tips along the way.
So, let's dive in and learn about some World Heritage together. Welcome everybody to our second episode of World Heritage Rookies. If you have already joined us in the last episode about the Galapagos Islands, then welcome back. I guess we did something right then.
And if you're new, welcome. This is a podcast about World Heritage Sites, so I hope we can entertain you. My name is Lina.
And I'm Ralph. And today I will be a lot more quiet compared to the last episode because today it's all just coming from you, Lina, and you're going to talk with us about the second World Heritage Site on our overall list, which is
the city of Quito. I actually was quite surprised that the World Heritage Site number 1 and number 2 were in the same country, a sister country to my land, Ecuador. So really excited for today's episode.
Great achievement when you think about it, really. I mean, not just that Galapagos Islands is something really iconic, but then directly the capital. It must mean something.
And that's something impressive. So it just means that you have to go to Ecuador as soon as possible. We need to go to Ecuador as soon as possible.
Yeah, I still cannot believe that you have never been there, as you told me.
No, unfortunately no. But I mean, it's in my top 10. But honestly, everything is in my top 10.
Yeah, your top 10 is, I think, at least 50 places you want to visit. So it's hard to
It changes from week to week, okay? No judgment. There is a lot of things to see in this war.
True. But coming back to Quito, I assume, actually, yeah.
So, as always, we will start with maybe talking into each other. So, Ral, what do you know about the city of Quito?
I feel like I'm cheating a little bit because obviously doing my research for the Galapagos Islands, I learned a little bit about this. So, yeah, I know that Quito is the capital of Ecuador. I know that it's one of the highest located, I'm not 100% if it's only capitals or if it's cities overall, but it's located pretty high in the mountains to my knowledge. And yeah, apart from that, I have an assumption, which I do not know, but I have an assumption that saying that it's not located near the seaside, it might not have been originally founded by the conquistadors, because what I learned, for example, about Lima when I was in Peru is that because it's on the seaside, it's an indication for a lot of cities that were founded by the conquistadors at the seaside, well, to have a place where they can receive the ships and everything else. So my assumption would be that since it's in the mountainside and not on the seaside, that it actually was not founded by the Spanish.
Well, you are 100% right. Quito, it's the second highest capital in the world at 2,850 meters, so it's quite high. Indeed, it's in over the Andes range, so of course it's not close to the sea level per se, and it's the second World Heritage Site. 2 by 2, let's call it.
True. When you say second highest, do you know what the highest capital actually is?
Yes, La Paz.
That's Bolivia, right?
Yes. Actually, I know pretty well because Bolivia always plays in La Paz, and for every Latin American,
for every football match,
yes,
it's
really
like their secret weapon. Then, that just everybody's out of breath.
Nobody can breathe there. So, a little bit coming back to our topic today, we are going really far out of place. But as always, I will mention first our sources. So today I will also be taking information from the UNESCO World Heritage Center at unesco.org. Also, the community we mentioned last episode at worldheritagesite.org/Quito, which are always good sources of information for anything related to World Heritage Sites.
Yeah, highly recommended. We use it really often to get some insights and travel tips, and it's really cool to hear about some of the travel stories also from other World Heritage travelers.
Yes, always go there for getting good tips and also understanding how good it's perceived by the community, the specific site. Also, of course, we took some information, some basic information from Wikipedia and a lot of history information from the World History Encyclopedia, especially about Atahualpa, really famous guy in Latin America, which I will explain, and I will explain why in a couple minutes. And finally, a specific site talking about the most emblematic World Heritage sites in the city of Quito.
So that's like something dedicated just to the World Heritage of Quito?
Yes, and to explain what can each site or each emblematic building offer regarding the World Heritage.
Okay, that always, I have to admit, gives me a bit even more confidence when there is a dedicated site to it. So that's a good sign already about what's going to expect us.
Exactly. So, well, now entering a little bit into the topic. So let's start with the history. So, of course, at the beginning of the known history of Quito, there was not specifically any settlement in the Quito highlands, how we call them or call these early periods today. They were just people living or walking through the Quito highlands just as nomads as early as 1500 BCE. They were nomads in these pre-Columbian periods until 500 BCE. They are some well-known cultures that were through these highlands, for instance, the Cotocolaos.
I could not pronounce that.
That's quite difficult even for me that I speak Spanish, but they were just inhabitants in the mountain percent and not specifically where Quito is located. Then in the 14th and 15th century, it's when the history of the city of Quito really starts. It's called the pre-Inca development period. And basically it's when multiple settlements and a specific marketplace was actually created in what we all today know as Plaza San Francisco. In this market, a lot of these Andean inhabitants that were nomads exchanged goods. Some of them we know. So it were the Quijos, the Jumbo, and they basically sparked the idea of actually having an Andean, more established community.
So it was like in the beginning more of a trading hub or like a trading post instead of a full city?
It was a full marketplace.
Full market, okay. And where like everybody just from the area could come together and see as an exchange.
Exactly. So they probably had a lot of goods like wool and food, and they just exchanged it in a specific place that could be today located in today's Quito.
That means then also, I assume that actually Quito is quite centrally located in this whole Andean plateau, as you mentioned it, when there are so many cultures are interchanging, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, we could say. And it's really common for Latin American cities to be in a really specific central plateau that could really be easy reachable by several groups of people. Then it's when the Inca conquest and rule starts. The Incas enter the city of Quito in the mid-15th century, around 1480, by Tupac Yupanqui, which later was replaced by Huayna Capac. And he basically conquered Quito in the year 1480. He was quite happy with Quito, so he made this center as one of the most important religious and political centers of the Inca Empire. And the city of Quito stood alongside Cusco and Cajamarca, which were the biggest cities of the empire. Like, they created this tripleta of cities that really define the power of the Incas.
That is also quite an achievement when you think about it, that especially being named next to Cusco, which is, well, still like, I assume the city that everybody assumes, that everybody thinks about when thinking about the Incas. So that is quite an achievement then also.
I think that it was quite an achievement, and it also reflects that it really depends of the ruler how successful.
Who's the boss and like what
Yeah.
does he or she like?
If they like the place, they will develop the place. If they don't like the place, they will just rip it apart, right?
Sort of a bit of a spoiler. That's also going to be a theme in the episode that I'm going to talk about next time. So it seems to be a
Rulers
universal truth. Yeah,
ruling.
rulers can make or break places. Yeah.
It's like buses today. They can make your living hell or a paradise. Well, then we entered the period of Atahualpa, actually. And, unfortunately, also the fall of the Incas. Who was Atahualpa? Atahualpa was the last Inca emperor, and he was based in Quito. He had a little bit of a difficult situation. First, his father, Hayana, died of smallpox in 1528. It was, of course, a deadly epidemic that weakened the empire, and we all know that this epidemic was mostly brought by the colonization. And during this period, unfortunately, when he died, his father suddenly died. He started a 6-year war with his half brother, which his name was Baskar or Huascar or Baskar. I mean, I'm sorry if I am butchering it. And he won just before the Spaniard arrived to the Inca Empire.
I think that's what in the end we know. Obviously we remember then the fall of the Inca Empire, but when you look from it from an eagle perspective about all the events that led to this, and like it you have the feeling really everything came together. So obviously you had the diseases that were brought in and that really weakened the whole empire. You had a civil war that has been going on and obviously also weakened the empire, and well,
finally the Spaniards.
Yeah,
just
with the technological advantage that they have. Yeah, that's
exactly. That's unfortunately how the Inca Empire fall. Well, before he died, who actually started his ambush to him was actually Francisco Pizarro in 1532. And he ambushed Atahualpa's forces at Cajamarca, killing 7,000 of his soldiers, even though remember, the Spaniards only had 168 people. What it is impressive, the forces of Atahualpa's were around 80,000 men, and not even one Spaniard died during this ambush.
I have to admit, like, I'm always curious how much of this is actually true, and in another way, like how much might be propaganda in a way, because we know the history is ultimately written by the winner, or by the victors. So I'm like curious if it was actually like this, because just from my point of view, yes, even with superior technology and with guns, just the sheer amount of numbers should have been able to deal with the Spanish people.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, this is what is registered in the records. It may not be 100% true and just give this image of the all-powerful,
the mystery and the
colonizers, but of course, that's the information we have today. Unfortunately, when Atahualpa was ambushed, he was also captured. And the Spaniards asked for ransom. They asked for a full room of gold and silver, which in today's war will be around $50 million. Of course, he was the ruler, so the Incas pay this gold and silver. I mean, let's have in mind that the perception that we have about gold and silver is not the same that the Aborigines gave in that moment. It was, of course, a form of showing status and religious importance, but it was not something that it was considered valuable. Not to the standards of the Spaniards, at least.
Yeah, I seem to remember that it was mainly for religious purposes, right?
Exactly.
So I think like gold was the visualization of the sun, whereas silver was the visualization or like the material of the moon. So it did not have the same material value as it did for the Europeans that alive.
Exactly. So of course, when they asked for this ransom, they didn't put too much pressure against you.
The life of your ruler, and the other hand is the...
Yeah, it's way more important. Unfortunately, the Spaniard anyway executed Atahualpa in 1533, 1 year after he was ambushed. After that, it was just a matter of time before, unfortunately, the Inca Empire collapsed. Well, something interesting about Atahualpa until today is Ecuador has a really interesting legend called the Inca legend, where it says that one day Atahualpa's will sever head will grow up in a new body, and when that happens, the Inca power will be restored.
So, like, a body will grow from the head. So,
From his severed head, which we don't know. I don't
where
really
it is,
think.
okay.
We don't really think that we know.
That
where
sounds
he is.
scary. But on the other hand, I assume like every country, every place has its specific legend, and yeah.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. So it's just to reflect how important this guy was. I mean, he's really well known for all of us because, I mean, he was the last one and he was recorded and he was pretty much kidnapped, and his people paid this for the kidnappers, and still he was executed. So it was a really, really, well, dramatic circumstance, let's say.
Yeah,
let's say.
that's true. It's and also the question what I then always find curious because like, well, yeah, sort of the revival of the Inca Empire, because while it is now also quite known for its downfall after the conquest, but I seem to remember, well, when they were expanding their own empire, obviously the Incas were also, well, they were conquerors. So
of course, and it's not called an empire just because.
Yeah.
And I think that that's also important to remember that an empire comes to place by conquering others. And I think that that's the same through history because history repeats itself.
Yeah, conquer and be conquered.
Exactly. Well, after that, the Spanish foundation started, and now we started the period of the Colonial Quito. The city was officially created or founded on December 6, 1534, 1 year after the death of Atahualpa. It was founded by Sebastián Balcazar, and he called it San Francisco de Quito. The ruins of the Inca city before were called Quito, and it was just kind of a mix between the name of the person that entered Quito and the name given by the Incas. So San Francisco de Quito. From there, Quito became a regional center, a colonial center, and by 1563, it was named the capital of the Royal Audience of Quito. Here, maybe just a parenthesis, just to explain that these audiences, it's basically how the Spaniards call their administrative bodies and cities, just to explain that this city had the governance of the place that was around the audiences. So, for instance,
Like
we have the
local
audience
capital.
of Bogota. Exactly. So it was just to show that this was the administrative power without saying, okay, that's a capital, because of course they didn't want to give so much freedom to each of these specific locations. After that, the city economically grew a lot by wool textile. And of course, this economic growth attracted a lot of settlers, including other Spanish people and local inhabitants as well. Then we jump a little bit, and by the 18th and 19th century, there was a huge struggle for independence. That's when basically all movements of independence started in Latin America. As many of you may or may know, Ecuador belonged to the Gran Colombia, which was 4 countries, Venezuela, Colombia, Panama, and Ecuador, of course. And during the 1800s, Quito experienced a lot of political instability, multiple coups, and finally fought for independence.
That's also, when you're now telling it, I know it now because we have talked about it in the past a lot, but that was also when you told me about the history, and then like that's the reason behind the flags of Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador being so similar, which it makes absolutely sense when you take a look at it, and then like you know about this background, but when you are perhaps not that familiar with the history of the area, then you just think, oh yeah, those look pretty similar, but yeah, it's because they, together with Panama, used to be a country.
Exactly. And just for the people to easily recognize them, the flag that do not have anything is just yellow, blue, and red. That's Colombia. The yellow, blue, and red plus the stars. That's Venezuela. And red, blue, and red. Yellow, red, and yellow, blue, and red with the coat of arms. That's Ecuador. I'm sorry if I even confuse you more.
I was confused in the beginning, but at least me personally, I'm okay.
So nothing, Colombia, stars, Venezuela, coat of arms, Ecuador. Perfect. So now, after the independence movement, there was the boom of growth also in Quito's population. And by the 20th century, it became, thanks to oil and development, economically development, the urban city and modern city that we know today. So yeah, basically that's the main history of the city of Quito. Now let's talk about some fun facts before going to why it's a World Heritage Site. First of all, as Ral also mentioned it in the last episode, Quito has a really mild climate all year. It's called the city of eternal spring, and always temperatures vary between 13 degrees and 17, 18 degrees. So it's always nice during the day. It can be a little bit cold during the night, but you can actually visit it in all seasons. That's really nice because you really do not have to program yourself to go in a specific season. It's Ecuador.
Yeah.
We come back to what we mentioned last night. It's literally in the middle of the war. Also, Quito, the city of Quito, has the biggest or the tallest winged Virgin Mary in the world. Winged Virgin Mary is Virgin Mary with flights, with
Wings, yeah.
with wings. Sorry. And its measure is over 41 meters tall. It's made of aluminium and it was built in 1975.
Sometimes I have the feeling that wherever you go in Latin American countries, you will find a huge holy statue. That's like really impressive when you get to learn about it. Yeah,
use culture.
And everybody thinks about obviously Christ the Redeemer in Brazil, but when you really get into this topic, you will learn that there are so many statues, and
we have several in Colombia as well.
Yeah, I know. Like that was also what was I'm really surprised when I saw some of them during our trips. It's like really impressive. You do not have it in the beginning in your mind, but it makes sense.
That's true. Again, we are Catholics all the way. Then, of course, what is actually really nice about the city of Quito, it has a really charm and historic center. So the Quito's old town keeps his local atmosphere. So you won't find big international chains like McDonald's or Pizza Hut, just a small local business.
That's cool.
As many other cities in Latin America, we also love to put cities around volcanoes, and Quito is not the exception. Quito is surrounded by 14 volcanoes. The most important and closest is Pichincha to the west, and of course that makes the city experience frequent earthquakes and volcanic ash from 14 volcanoes.
Yeah, that increases the risk a little bit.
But that will happen in any other city, at least in Central America and the first, like the northern countries on South America. Nicest thing to do, one of the nice things to do in Quito, it's to visit Pichincha's volcano at 4,000 meters over the sea level with the teleférico that gives you the most incredible views of the whole city.
So I assume you can overlook the whole city then from this volcano because it's probably the highest vantage point.
Exactly. So that's one of the must do.
Yes, a natural sightseeing platform basically.
Perfect. And now I guess that this opens a little bit the door of why Quito is a World Heritage Site. So First, it was inscribed as well as Galapagos in 1978. And the criteria were, how many criterion do you think that Quito has?
I assume it has less than the Galapagos Islands because they are like an extraordinary one with 4. Let's go with, let's go then perhaps with 1.
No, actually it has 2. Okay. And one is because we haven't mentioned it. Like the first one is, of course, because of his historic center. It's, of course, an standout example of architecture, and it's incredibly well preserved. Despite having a really highly damaged earthquake in 1917, it remains as the least altered and best preserved historic center in the whole Latin America.
So when you want to experience it as
colonial
as authentic as possible, then you have to go to Quito.
Exactly. So it's really well preserved until today. Is one of the jewels of the whole country. And the second one, it's cultural change. The city of Quito has a remarkable example of an artistic style that they developed themselves called Baroque School of Quito, or in Spanish, Escuela Quiteña. And basically, it's a fusion of Spanish, Italian, Moorish, Flemish, and indigenous art, which made it one of the most important significant contributions of art in the whole Latin America.
That's an interesting combination of art styles, yeah.
Exactly. So this artistic school has several places, remarkable places around the city of Quito that you can also explore. One of them, and the most impressive, is the Convent of San Francisco, where you can really see the iconography and this art explained by itself. Not only this place include this artistic blend, but also other ones, like, for instance, the monastery of Santo Domingo, which is one also of the largest architectural complex in this type of infrastructure in the whole Americas. It is today an art museum, and it holds more than 3,500 works of colonial art.
I guess then, probably it's not just from Ecuador, but from more in general the area, right?
Yeah, I will assume, but I'm not 100% sure. The other place where you can see there's a specific unique artistic style is the Church of Jesuit College of La Compañía. It is basically for his famous facade, which is entirely carved in volcanic stone, and in its interior you can also see the church in completely covered gold leaf, because Catholics love gold.
Oh yes, that's true. But you have to admit, it looks impressive.
Looks amazing.
I mean, it looks so impressive when you have gold leaf in it, and I guess the combination of volcanic stone and gold leaf must be
impressive. And it's also one of the most important Baroque temples in the Americas. Baroque, it was not per se extremely popular in the architecture of Latin America. So it's one of these examples, extraordinary examples that you can find still today. The other place you can find that, or you can see this specific style of the Baroque School of Quito, is the Basilica del Voto Nacional. This is an impressive neo-Gothic temple designed by the French architect Emilio Terliat. I may be butchering his name as well.
Maybe.
French
might not be our strongest language.
It is not. And of course, it's a church inspired by Notre Dame. It has gargoyles, but these gargoyles represent Ecuadorian fauna like caimans, turtles. We talked about last episode, the boobies, and pumas.
The bird. We're talking about the bird, which is called a booby.
We love boobies in this podcast. I can't say it.
Yeah, I'm not saying anything.
There is also another legend about this basilica. It says that it has never been fully finished, and there is a legend that wherever it is finished, Ecuador will cease to exist as a sovereign state.
everything about the legends you tell me today is it's like really the extreme. So like either one is like, okay, the return of the Inca Empire, the other one is like basically the downfall of Ecuador. Like really extreme legends.
Of course, I mean, many cities in Latin America are about extremes, like the highest places, the most exotic places, the full of volcano places. So it's just how we are. We like extremes. The final place is La Plaza de la Independencia, which is, of course, it's big square where you will see all the state institutions and also the monuments of independence and the heroes of the whole country. This is basically why the city of Quito is a World Heritage Site. So you have to visit. It's an amazing place. And now we can give you some travel tips so your experience is as nice as I can imagine. So, first of all, Quito is highly recommended destination for all seasons, also for new travelers, because it has an experience not only offering you a modern city, but also a colonial preserved city, plus the possibility to visit one of the most beautiful nature-wise places in the world, which is Galapagos.
Which, as we like, if you did not listen to our episode last time, which I think you should, but if you did not, you actually have to leave you can only reach the Galapagos from 2 cities, and one of them is Quito.
Exactly. So anyway, why not to stop for a couple days just to experience it? It is really safe, and this historic center is very walkable. It's despite it has a lot of steps and ups and downs, so please use a comfortable shoes, but you will always notice police presence, and so you can be reassured you will have no problem. Also, Ecuador has something really good, which is the currency is the US dollar, so making transactions is actually completely straightforward. So just bring a small domination so you can get things in the streets and maybe tip as well. Transportation is also really easy. Taxis are really cheap and normally charge between 1 and to 3 euros for a small ride. So it's really not expensive. But also you can use the apps just to avoid being overcharged, just to be a foreign.
In case you're not from the euros, so 1 to 3 euros, I think should be like a similar approach also in US dollars. So I wouldn't say it's like 150 to $4 about this, but I think the range is still similar between euros and dollars for the prices.
Exactly. Of course, we are talking about the second highest capital city in the world, so please mind the activities that you're going to do the first days. You can experience some altitude sickness, so just make sure you acclimatize, take it easy for the first hours. Do not go to do a hiking to Pichincha, at least not the first day. And a part of the must-see attractions I mentioned before, there is you will always find in the historic center many other monasteries, churches, and historical buildings that you shouldn't miss out. Also, highly recommend the museums of the city. There is many museums that are highly recommended, like the Casa de Alabaro, which contains pre-Columbian art, and also the museum of the city, where you can see all the history and the remains of the Incas, and after that the colonial city as well. And yes, more than that, what we could say is just visit, experience it yourself. For something they got the first World Heritage Sites in the world, so visit Ecuador as soon as possible, and when you are there, maybe move to Colombia.
Making some advertisement for your own home country, right?
Visit Colombia, viaja por ella. Travel through it. So yeah. What else we could say? I mean, it sounds amazing, and again, we will do it for sure.
Yeah, I have to admit, I was aware, of course, in advance that it was a World Heritage Site. I did not really know why, but when you mentioned it to be sort of classified as the best preserved colonial center, that's quite an achievement, because there are a lot of very beautiful, well-preserved colonial centers. So this must be a really special experience. And I have to admit, it's
And the nice thing is it has been preserved like that.
Yeah.
Because, of course, I mean, it is really hard to see today. I mean, for instance, in Bogota, you can also see a really historical preserved colonial city, but the level of preservation is what makes the
different,
difference.
Yeah.
And makes it unique.
And I assume it is also a struggle to keep it like this, because I know for a lot of other countries it's sometimes really difficult to keep the colonial centers intact because, well, they are buildings that are hundreds of years old. They are now exposed to all kind of,
and we have
factors.
many volcans in close to many main cities.
That is very, very curious. So thank you very much first for telling me all of this and making me learn also more about Quito. I have to admit, with now the combination of the episode about the Galapagos Islands and Quito, that really is okay, Ecuador needs to be really high on our next locations list.
Exactly. And this should also be yours for our listeners. For the rest, we can only say thank you so much for hearing to all our
to our ranting and sometimes not the smartest comments, but we hope you had as much fun as we had listening to each other. And next week...
What are we doing next week?
Yeah, next week it's again my turn. So what I already can tell is that we will not stay in Latin America or South America. So unfortunately not World Heritage Site number 3 for Ecuador. We're going to move to Europe and talk about, I think, one of my personal favorite World Heritage Sites for some reasons, which I will probably discuss more in detail in the next episode. But yes.
Looking forward. And believe me, it's going to be, I mean, I'm pretty sure you are going to listen to his excitement voice.
Yeah, this will be quite sure. No, until then, thank you so much for tuning in today also again. And we're looking forward to see you in the next episode and hopefully.
Until the next one, goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.